So, shall we start with the session? Mr. Bharat?
Jayashree will be starting sharp at 5. So, in the meanwhile, audience will be joining.
Okay. 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 Soumya,
Okay.
over
The
to you.
value of an idea lies in the using of it. Hello and good evening to one and all present here. I, Soumya Bakliwal, welcome you all to Entrepreneurship Masterclass with Alumni, organized by Entrepreneurship Cell, Amity University, Rajasthan, in association with Amity Innovation Incubator, Atal Innovation Mission, and Institution Innovation Council. This month was dedicated to interact and learn with some of our own. We have successfully conducted 3 masterclass with our alumni who shared their valuable insight and taught us how we can turn our ideas into business, how we can manage our finance, and how to build efficient customer relationships. And once again, we feel privileged to have our alumni here with us. With this, I would now like to introduce our first alumni guest for the evening, Mr. Sagar Katwa. Mr. Sagar is a 2017 biotech graduate from Amity University and completed his master's from MIT Institute of Design. He holds 4 plus years of experience in building business, driving growth, and managing people. Currently, he is working at Unotech Software Private Limited with experience in Strand Life Sciences as scientific support executive, and he is the also founder of Rockstone Sports Nutrition. We are fortunate to have you here, sir. Our next alumni guest for the evening, Mr. Himanshu Sharma. Mr. Himanshu graduated from Amity University in 2015, and he was also a co-founder and head of operations of Fresh and later became CEO. Currently, he is the co-founder of Wasted Leather Products LLP. He also has experience in charitism as mentor and investor. We are glad to have you here, sir. Our today's session will revolve around innovation and strategic planning in business design. Innovation is simply bringing your uniqueness into the world. Innovation could help us to achieve our strategic goals, and I think without strategy, it would not be possible to achieve our long term goals. So, without delaying any further, let's begin with our session. Meanwhile, you all can post your queries in the chat box. So, Himanshu sir, we would like to know about your thoughts on the topic.
Hi, thank you all for this opportunity here. Firstly, it is very, very important if you are laying a foundation of any business, any firm, it is very important and critical that the foundations are very, very strong and robust. For that to happen, you need to be clear in your head about the mission and the goal of the objective. And it is extremely critical parallelly that you also keep in mind the long-term growth, the market size, the short-term capital invention, and also the kind of people you are going to be a part of. Team is something which is going to be a part of your growth story, and also will have everything in it when it comes to achieving your financial and business stabilities at large. There are few things which are supposed to be kept in mind while designing your business strategy. There are few components that I feel and which has actually helped me to be able to excel further. One of them was, like I mentioned, was about the mission and goal of your company. You should be very, very clear where you want to take your company in the days to come. And then the second part is about core values. Without core values, you won't be able to stick to the fundamentals, the binding force, which is really, really necessary to be able to catapult yourself towards the journey is going to be immensely indestructible. So core values is the second thing that one should always keep in mind. If you are going to follow along a path in which you feel your company is going to do a lot for others without the greed of money, then that is also which is going to add value to your startup, right? Because ultimately the goal is to make something as a product which is going to add value to it, right? And third is something very, very critical down the line, because here comes the execution part, which is about SWOT analysis. So I felt, I mean, in all three of my ventures, SWOT was something which was able to give me an edge, to a kind of competitive advantage towards all my competitors in the same market, because it's ultimately it's a fight to capture the largest size of the pie and be the first mover. So you should be very, very well aware of the strengths that you have, and then you are ought to be aware of the weaknesses and the opportunities which are lying in the market ahead of you, and something which is called a barrier to entry, or you can say threat, wherein people would try to push you out of the business. So that is something which also stands critical in the entire process. So the SWOT is something which is, again, I would say it is very critical, because it gives you an edge, a kind of competitive edge over others, to be able to kind of adopt to different innovations and new tool sets, and probably make you ready for the future, so that you are able to absorb the kind of market which is evolving over time. So apart from that, there has to be a measuring entity wherein you define your objectives clearly. There are KPIs, key performance indexes, wherein this is mainly done to be able to gauge the kind of progress you are making in your organization for any short-term goal that you have set forward to be achieved. And apart from that, the strategies that you defined to which would help eventually to achieve all those objectives that you have set forth, and the operational efficiencies that you are going to achieve, which will come out of eventually executing the operations and the planning, if they are effective enough. So, and the fifth one is going to be, like I said, is again a reference to the measurement of the KPIs and the long-term and short-term goals that you have set for your organization, which also has an output in terms of tracking important measures. And then the other part is about the kind of funds that you want to put in. So apart from raising money for your startup to the kind of budget that you will be coming up, these two are also very, very crucial. I also feel there is a responsibility amongst all of us being founders, that innovation and USP is something which is always going to set us apart from the crowd. If you really want to kind of tap onto the competition in the market, and apart from that, as much as innovation is critically needed in any organization, it is also the core values that I referred earlier are important. So innovation has to drive the business to the right direction without compromising on qualities and your short-term goals. Rather, it would help you to be able to come out with more use cases of the technology or the product that you are already placed in the market, and will be also helping you to kind of tap onto the or stand apart as an advantageous competitor for your peers in the same segment, same market size, and for the very important point wherein the innovation has to come in, it is a continuous process that helps you along the development of your product. And also you kind of adopt from the latest trends in the market. You have to be very open to the changes happening around you. You need to keep an eye on the competitors, and also a shift in technology. I would like to use that word more often here, because a shift in technology, let's say I'll take up an example of blockchain technology. This is something which now has become popular among the crowd, and people are getting to know about the kind of revolution this is going to bring in for any kind of business right now. And it has immense potential to be the game changer in the next decade. So why I want to stress more upon the technological advancement or technological shift is because technology is something which is going to help you scale over. Right? If you can't change or improvise your business, which will largely be driven by technology, so this is kind of it is definitely going to set you to the back foot here. So technological advancements in terms of innovation is very important, along with time to time revision of the strategies for your business. And along with that, you have to stick to the core values. I think for now, this would be enough for me to throw some light into some critical points and be hovering over these things again in this session. I would like to get back to Sagar for this, if he wants to put more light on this particular topic.
Thank you, Himanshu. And before I start, I would like to thank Amity eCell for having me here, and thank you, Soumya, for a warm welcome. Yeah, so when I see the topic innovation and strategic planning in business design, what I would like to add is that innovation and strategic planning is itself a type of a business design. That is what we do in a business design. So my idea to so what Himanshu shared was more of an business execution and the management side of it. I would like to cover the part of that. That is when there is an idea stage, when you are about to think of setting a business or starting a business. You think of a business model. You think of who are going to be your customers. You think what value you are going to provide. You think what business environment I'll be operating into. So business design focuses more on these aspects and tries to position you in that sweet spot where the execution becomes seamless for you. So I would definitely cover on the details in the following session as we move ahead. So yeah, this is a brief from my end.
So as Himanshu sir said, SWOT analysis, people face problem in grabbing opportunity, I think like that.
Right. So uh, when we so when I said that looking at the customer segment, what value you are going to provide and what business environment you are going to operate, I think these are three pillars which kind of help you figure out the challenges which you must be facing in your problem and what opportunities you have to pivot around those challenges. So I think uh, so we have to think it in that way, that business model stays in the center. The value proposition is a zoom in of that business model, and the environment we function is a zoom out of that business model. So when we look at all of these three uh, in an bird eye view, then it gives us a very clear idea on what opportunities lie around. So when in example, if I have been targeting a customer, but I am not able to deliver a value, I am creating a value. I am selling X product, but I am not able to deliver that value. But that X product is not able to solve the problem of my customer. Then I'm not able to deliver that value, and then that might lead to a challenge. So looking at all of these three stuff at a on a single case gives us a very good feels like serves as a starting point to a SWOT analysis.
Thank you, sir.
Sagar, I would also like to add something to what you said just now.
Yes.
I mean, I have recently incorporated a company which is into the more of the innovation side of the business. That is largely about bringing in a kind of new raw material that we are already hooked on to since ages now. I'm into leather accessories business. I've started with my uncle, my maternal uncle. He has been in the same conventional business since last 20 years. And there was not much innovation, as you would call it, being seen in the conventional business processes and adoption of manufacturing techniques. So my role was to come up with something which would make us stand out in terms of capturing of the market. Because as much as you want to tap onto the current market segment, you want to create a new market altogether, right? Because opportunities would be coming out of those segments where you feel lies a scope, right? So what we did was we contacted IIT Kharagpur and IIT Kanpur. They were kind of researching on a technology wherein they would convert all the raw materials into a sustainable leather product by incorporating very few chemical processes as a change. So I mean, they were typically made out of materials that you would think probably would be more on the surprise side rather than a shock to you. So they were trying to make a new raw material which was made out of dried flowers that you usually use when you do puja at home. All these things were actually collected using supply chain. I mean, they did a different process when they were researching about it, but then the more localized process is what we usually kind of intercept at home. So this was also one of the things, and the second thing was the cactus leaves. Okay. Third was the peel of the pineapple. This is literally a vegetable waste for us, right? A wet waste kind of thing. So they were trying to come out with a technology wherein we can use all these perishable items and convert them into raw materials, which is going to take up a form of a different kind of leather, which is more sustainable. Even if you bury them, you won't find them after 3-4 years, right? I mean, the kind of sustainability I'm talking to you about, it's going to be huge if we are able to create a market of that size. I mean, PETA coming in at this point is very, very crucial and important, because they do understand the need wherein people want to shift themselves from cruelty towards animals and would want to adopt things which is more environmentally friendly, right? So, and another thing was the empty shells of coconut. That is something which I was also shocked to learn about, because in South India and the Western coastal region, coconut is very, very popular, right? I mean, if I take up a recent example, pandemic has made everyone realize that coconut is a superfood and very, very helpful in terms of boosting immunity and also a very good antioxidant, right? So the consumption has gone up. We have, in the past year, we have been kind of exporting a lot of surplus in India to other Gulf countries and European countries. But then the consumption has picked up here itself, which has resulted in a need for taking in those things for other, kind of a restructuring of the usage as a waste product. So that was one of the things that kind of intrigued me to get into this more. And also that is helping us in a way that we are trying to solve the problem of waste recycling, which is going to be sustainable again. So at this stage, we are able to produce kind of a leather which we are using for manufacturing leather belts. We are very soon going to come out with a very, very friendly product, user-friendly product, which is designed keeping in mind that we do not hurt the sentiments of people who are vegetarians. And also it should stand at a very good point when it comes to being environmental friendly, right? So, I mean, if I talk about the kind of pipelines we have laid down for this particular project, since last 2 years, I mean, since the time a pandemic came in, we had several plans to even start exporting, but then that did not materialize, and we even understand the sensitivity of the situation here. So as soon as we get out of the pandemic, we are going to start again. And this time we would be able to market ourselves better because we have understood in the past couple of years the need and more advancement which is needed in the same segment. So even bigger brands such as Chanel and Louis Vuitton, they are also moving on to the same segment. And in the days to come, this market is going to be huge. So my point here and the bottom line here is that it is also equally important that you tap onto the current market, be the market leader, try to achieve that. Rather, you should also focus on creating a new market for yourself.
Yeah.
So,
So I would totally agree with you, and that was a very interesting use case you just mentioned. Using this use case, I would like to explain few concepts. So what you just said was an example of what we call as a radical innovation. In literal terms, there are two major types of innovation. One is an incremental one, which we do it on an incremental basis. For example, if there would have been a leather company, they would have focused on creating more stylish leather belts, maybe more durable leather belts, or maybe more cheaper leather belts. That would have been an incremental innovation. What you and your company thought was to jump into something new which nobody would have thought of. So when we see a shift in a meaning of something which you are doing, we kind of define that in a space of radical innovation. Now there are ways to approach both of these innovations. When I talk about how to approach a radical one, that is a little tricky, and that is more of a game of intuition than a, I would say, learning. So taking an example of what Himanshu said, uh, I'm just trying to depict a flow through which someone can derive to a similar sort of innovation. So, for example, Himanshu would have been thinking that let's think of a leather company, and he must be defining his customer segments where one of the personas he would have identified that people are getting climate conscious lately. People are getting animal conscious lately. There is a need of circular economy. There is a need for waste management. So he would have thought these as a people. So he would have thought one of the persona where people are getting conscious about all of this stuff. On the other hand, where he was looking at the key trends into this industry, he must be thinking that leather is not degradable, and there is a lot of other stuff. There is a lot of movement happening in the biodegradability. That's a very key trend happening around there. Maybe in some of the market forces, you would have thought that even the plastic is degradable. Why not leather? Uh, one of the uh, one of the industry analysis, you would have thought that there is a lot of waste which is happening around, along with the food waste, along with the chemical waste. So there could be something which can be done in this space. So hence combining all of this, you would have thought that let's combining circularity, biodegradability, climate consciousness, and the meaning or the usability of the leather itself, and combine all of this, and let's come up with something new which people haven't seen at all. So this is more of a holistic approach which he would have taken to land with this. So yeah, so this is more of a structure, or I would say approach people take while reaching to such types of innovation. So yeah, that's it.
I can even think of a very, very good example. I was recently studying a case study, which was about Lever Brothers Pakistan Limited. So Rin it was already launched in India at the time. I'm talking about the time of 1988. So at that time, Rin was something which was very popular, and there were other brands as well which were present in the market when it came to the detergent segment and the non-soap segment and dishwasher segments. So Rin was trying to create its image at that time, and uh, the Lever brothers in Pakistan, they were kind of facing this challenge when they were trying to penetrate the market. Uh, so the color blue, which is imparted, and the idea of having Ren in blue was solely because of a lot of factors. First one was the color blue kind of imparts more whiteness to cloth. Okay, and also it gives a more of a brand image by having blue color. But the challenge here was there were already a few brands available in the market at the time, and people were mostly using the blue color, which was launched for dishwash segment only by previous companies. So Rin was not able to differentiate itself in the dishwasher segment. Although it was totally launched for washing clothes and it was in the detergent segment, but then people started using it for washing dishes. So that was one of the challenge with Hindu.
I think Himanshu sir is facing some internet issues. Sagar sir, would you like to continue?
Yes. So I would like to uh, share the similar example which Himanshu was trying to tell. This was more into a detergent space, where in early 90s, the detergent were solely used. So detergents, there was a huge market and the detergent space was growing rapidly. Uh, and to inform you guys, back then there wasn't a fragrance into a detergent which we see lately. The detergent was a plain chemical which used to produce foam and wash clothes. Uh, there was a company which I'll not name it, which came up with this idea of adding a fragrance to the detergent, and suddenly the market boomed like anything. So thinking of this example takes us to a question that what and how that thing kind of lead to shooting that market to some another level. Now we think we kind of call this as a innovation of meaning. So this is another example of innovation, which we call it as an innovation of meaning. While people only so the primary job of a detergent is to wash clothes. While people were using it to do that, the companies thought of that what is the another meaning this detergent could provide. And while after brainstorming, they came up that freshness is a very important component, which can be delivered with the help of detergents, and that's where the idea of adding a fragrance to the detergent came in. So other companies would have kind of innovated on the quality of the detergent, uh, how strongly it can wash dirt, etc., etc. But when we kind of invented the meaning of something which we use, that kind of innovation lays the uh, foundation and makes you and your brand unforgettable. So yeah, that is one example. And the similar thing happened to candles as well. Earlier, candles were only used as an illumination stuff, but then the idea of a candle as an accessory came in, and the whole meaning of just using candle as a candle shifted. And now, so this is I'm talking about a century ago. A candle stuff happened a century ago. So now, if we see, we as a generation, we haven't seen the candles used primarily for illumination. We have always noticed candles as a source of some accessory and some sort of beautification stuff. So that was the meaning which got reinvented, and that's how the completely new market evolved.
So, so what type of KPIs should we use to track innovation in business design?
Uh, KPIs to use innovation in business design. See, when you talk of business design, it is a it is a combination of, I would say, a mindset and a method. Mindset, design mindset, and business methods. So it would be a very broad of a term to mention and to measure a KPIs for. So yeah.
Okay, sir. So, like, do you think innovation and point of view are related? Like our point of view.
Our point of view on what?
So, our point of view on different thing will lead to our innovative idea.
Yes, so I would not call it a point of view. I would call it as a scattered vision. Sorry, splattered vision. So there are two type of vision. Even in an, for I, when we focus on something, my focus is on a very pinpoint stuff. And if I see, I can see what all is going around me in periphery, which kind of, so if there is a simple movement around there, I can spot it. But if I have to witness that, I have to turn my face and see it. So that vision is what we call a splatter vision. So having a good splatter vision leads to a good innovation, because then you have an eye to see that what all is going around the peripheries, what all is moving there, what all problems my customer are facing. Is that a real problem? No, maybe that thing is solving that problem. The real problem is that what trends are moving in. So picking up those points, connecting those dots are, according to me, something which leads to a better innovative solution.
Himanshu sir, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Uh,
Hi, extremely sorry. It was raining heavily here, so my Wi-Fi is not stable, so I got cut off. I think I missed a pretty significant chunk of the conversation here, but I'll try to pick up what I know. So I was trying to give an example of how Lever Brothers in Pakistan were trying to relaunch Ren. So, I mean, the bottom line was that I wanted to associate this particular case study with the kind of planning or strategic planning we do, right? We are talking about the Lever Brothers. They are a giant in the FMCG segment. So we can't expect them to go lesser in terms of the planning before entering the market. They must have done several kind of superficial replications before actually entering it, right? So even then, they were not able to change the perspective and the kind of notion the customers already had developed with the green color of the dish bar. So they did not even try to change the color of the soap, but then they tried to come out with a very fresh campaign wherein they were educating people to the good use of the product that they have launched. So this in the long term had helped them to be able to place themselves again in the detergent segment. But the idea was they suffered huge losses in those 3-5 years when they had launched Ren. So their SWOT analysis failed. Their objectives failed. There was nothing significant in the KPIs, but then they had to improvise too much on their business strategies. So there are times when things don't go as per your planning. Doesn't matter how much you have strategized it, considering every single intrinsic details about the business plan. So there are at times things go wrong, and you have to be quick in terms of dealing with the ambiguities that arise out of this situation. And this is where your entrepreneurial talent comes in. So you have to be agile in terms of planning. You have to always have an A/B testing. You're always supposed to be ready with plan A, B, C, but not necessarily. I mean, if you have it, you are always on the safer side. But if you trust your guts, you trust your instincts, you can always come up with a solution. Over to you, Sagar.
So, but why is innovation so difficult?
Are you asking me, Soumya?
So both.
Okay. Sagar, would you like to answer that, or shall I take it?
I can try. So,
Yeah, please.
innovation in itself is not difficult, but sustaining that innovation, commercializing on that innovation, uh, is difficult, I would say, as per my knowledge. And the reason we say that innovation is difficult, it's because we don't understand the process which leads us to that innovation. So when I say that when we talk about different types of innovation, there are set of processes, there are set of flow, uh, which, or I would say a method to the madness, which leads us to more of an incremental side of innovation. There are certain methods which kind of leads us to the innovation of the meaning, and there are certain processes which leads us to the radical stuff. But I would say uh, having, as what Himanshu said, that having an agile mindset or having that splatter vision is something which is very crucial to reach there. So I would also like to understand your view as well, Himanshu, on this.
Yeah, sure. So I honestly feel that innovation is something which does not entirely change the business model, because it has to be gradual, considering the mission and the vision of your business. And there is a very thin line between innovation and customization. I'd like to explain that using an example. So what happens is, if you have launched a product already, okay, and the sales numbers that you had forecasted are nowhere to be seen in your balance sheet, right? You're not doing good, you're spending too much money in promotion. So eventually what you do is you take the bottom down approach, and you get a feedback from the market, from the customers, by running a survey, trying to understand what all eccentricities we have missed when we were launching the product. Something even in the survey before the launch, that is in the pre-launch segment, we have missed something or not. So that is a kind of insight which only customer is going to give you after they have the product in their hand, right? So I'll tell you an example. There was a very, I won't take out the name here. There was a very premium brand of shampoo, which had, they tried to place themselves in the luxury segment. And typically the range of 150 ml of the shampoo was more than 1,500 rupees. It was entirely luxury. So the plan was that people who comes in the top tier of the income group would be able to try it, because they love luxury products. So it was mainly targeted for those segment only. But within 6 months of the launch, they did not get decent sales. So they were confused. Despite running several surveys at the pre-launch stage, they were not able to tap onto the market. People were not really interested. Even if they buy for the first time, looking at the advertisement, the kind of money they had spent on it, on the advertisements and the campaigns, they were not coming back. There were no returning customers. So they were actually losing out the kind of market they previously had, considering their brand name. So what they did was, one of the guy in the team was he came up with a solution that will try to give them a feel of our luxury product. What they did was they started giving out a free sachet outside their house, outside their shops. And with that, they were able to have few more customers coming the next week, when they would visit with their family on a Sunday, or let's say a weekend, and they would probably buy the product if they liked the sachet as a trial, and that was given out for free. So rather than calling back the entire inventory or the production that you have already rolled out in the market, that will be a sink in the pot. And they did understand the kind of money they have put in terms of production, marketing. It was not a very, very genuine solution, right? So they thought of placing themselves in a different way, wherein they also give the customer a feel of it. Because one thing which was found in the feedback was, before even trying a product which was never thought about, or there was no word of mouth marketing, so even then people won't be convinced, right, for a product which is so expensive, for 150 ml. I mean, that won't even last a couple of weeks for a family of 6, right? So that was the idea, and they were able to bring in customization and not innovation. So I mean, I hope this example was able to make you people understand that there is a thin line between innovation and customization. Yeah.
So
Sagar, sir, sorry, sir, you can continue.
yeah. So based on the case study which Manch mentioned, I have a very interesting stuff to share on this. So the case which he presented is what the most of the startups do. They think of an idea, they validate it in some or the other way, they launch it, they wait for customers, but customers doesn't come, and then they pivot their whole strategy, and then they again wait for the customers. So that is one approach. Another approach which usually we take in terms of business design is we create value and growth. So after we have rationalized our idea, we have rationalized our product, before launching it, or even before, if it's a tangible one, before producing it, we take we take some value hypothesis, or I would say we take some value assumptions and some growth assumptions. We assume that XYZ stuff would provide XYZ value to my customers. We assume that XYZ thing will lead to XYZ growth in this month, in these many months. And based on those assumptions, we run some experiments. We run experiments, we validate those assumptions or we validate those hypotheses, and based on whatever the results come, we go in for the production and the launch. This kind of saves the whole cycle, which might lead to, I would say, a no growth or a staggered growth situation. So, yeah.
Sagar, sir, and Himanshu, sir, since you both have experience, since you have already started with Fresh, and Sagar, sir, you also have experience. So, today a lot of people, a lot of young people, when they are starting with their startup, they have a brilliant idea, but but from that idea to starting up that whole business, there's a whole long road. So what do you think they should prioritize first? Like, how should they plan their strategies?
Sagar, you can go first.
So according to me, there are uh, two factors. One is getting your value proposition game strong. And when I talk about value proposition, not only that my X product is going to derive X value to this customer, what I mean is, and when I say value proposition, that means that you have defined your customer segment beforehand, and that too in a very concrete form. So when I talk about value prop, that is more like what all jobs my customer is going to do, and what what all jobs my product is trying to help them get done. So we kind of take a jobs to be done approach, and we think of it in a way that my product is going to help my customer make X progress into his life, and that's how I'm going to add X value to him. So one pillar of that is making that game very strong, and the other part of it, as I mentioned, is to get the hypothesis part very strong. Once you've identified the value, you generate those hypotheses, and once those hypotheses are validated, you have a two-sided sword in your hand, and then any battle can be won ahead of that.
Great point, Sagar. I totally agree with that. Thank you for bringing it up. I also, even I feel customer segment, market segmentation is very important. Placing as much as placing your product in the right segment. Also, before starting off, you need to figure out what your market size is, because in a very confined boundary, we sometimes tend to think, because we are largely connected with internet, right? We think there is one junction between us and the entire world is internet. So we try to grasp in any kind of information from the internet to be able to come out to reach a conclusion when it comes to planning and strategizing our business idea. So it is even equally important if you do some ground research, because sometimes the ground reality is really earthbreaking that you can't even estimate. So being ourselves physically present on the ground tends to give us a more broadened view of the entire situation. So that is also important for me, because when I was kind of laying down the foundation for Frush, I run a preliminary study with for a span of 18 months when I was in college, and I used to go to the Jaipur city every weekend. Saturday, Sunday, it was fixed for me in my timetable. I used to go in the morning. When we were trying to look for a fabricator for our food truck, it took us almost 6 months to finalize a guy who would actually do pretty much in the customization part according to what we wanted. Because since we were also from the engineering background, so me and Abhinav, we wanted to incorporate most of the stuff we had learned in college, like the aesthetics, the thermodynamic efficiencies, and whole lot of things. I mean, it was also about the ease of internal movement and then communication and everything. So it is very important when you sit down with people. If you are connected with people who are already in the industry or who are veterans, it is always good. I mean, like Sagar said, he's trying to get into the consultation space. So it would be always good if you reach out to people who have gone through the same phase and who possess knowledge about the industry. So I mean, they would at least be able to save you some time that you would be trying to learn yourself by wasting resources. And it is equally important that you kind of have some financial backing before you start off something, because things might turn really bad and things might go south in no time, despite hundreds of hours you have put into kind of tap onto all the eccentricities in place. But then you won't even get to know when things are going to go bad. So you should have some financial backing with you. I'm not recommending that this is one of the necessities of starting off, but then if you have it, it's always good, a plus for you.
So
Okay. Yeah, Sam.
yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
should I continue?
Yeah, sure.
So while execution our idea, how strategic planning will help us in that? Himanshu sir.
Okay. In execution of the idea. Like I said, I mean, the 5 components that I pointed out, those are very important, and that would help you to at least lay down the first, second, third step, and then you can focus on developing the 4th one. You don't need to have like all the 20 steps involved in the process and beforehand, because ultimately you are going to focus on the first step firsthand, right? So execution is something which is, it's more of an experience when you actually write an exam and when you go to the Viva, right? So these are 2 different fields wherein the experiences for both of these environments are entirely different. So sometimes when people see, that's what I mentioned. I mean, it is equally important for you to go on the ground and study the situation yourself, feel it, how critical it is to think by being in the same situation. Let's say I'll try to, I mean, I usually like when I talk, I try to relate to as many examples as I can, so that people understand the point, mainly on in and around the stories. So when I was kind of studying the market for Frush, there was one food truck which was in the city at that time. I'm talking about the time 2013 December. So at the time there was one food truck that we came to know about. This guy, he was from, he had worked with few big brands in the hotel industry, namely Taj and Vivanta. So they were in the same industry since last 20 years, and this guy had started off. So we went there by being a customer. We ordered something, we ate it, we loved it, and then we spent 1 more hour to try to understand the customer dynamics, right? Because that is equally, you become a bug on the wall to be able to understand silently, right? And that gives you a different kind of insight. So it is, like I mentioned, it is equally important for you to be on ground. And also when you start off something, when it comes to the execution part, things are different. So firstly, you have to have the first step in place, well planned out, and you should be ready for the second one. If you are a team of more than 3, then the task kind of becomes easier. You can distribute tasks, and you can also hope for efficiencies on each one of them. You can rely on things. They can run errands parallelly for you, so that you can you are able to stick to the deadline more often than usual.
So in design language, we call this a game of empathy and field ethnography, where we try to put in, where we kind of shadow the customer in terms of understand what they're exactly doing. Uh, so this is not a stalking I'm talking about. We kind of shadow them in a way of we take interviews, we understand their pain points, we understand what all stuff they are at this point doing to solve that problem, and then we kind of observes what all stakeholders are there in the between. So that these all perspective is, I would say, a very, very important in able to establish a solid foundation.
Surely, sir. So just wanted to ask you, like, in like before COVID, there were a lot of ideas, and obviously, but since COVID has struck us, and in all this pandemic, a lot of things have changed, especially for business, especially ideas. Now, ideas are changing towards more COVID, how to solve these kind of problems if it arrives in future as well. So a lot of new industries, especially biotech industries, are coming at the forefront, and they are saving us from this pandemic whole vibe. So what do you think, like, as in future, what kind of new industries we would be seeing?
So, Himanshu, you would like to take it?
Nara, if you have something in mind, you can go ahead first.
So, when we look at what all new industries are going to emerge, I think we are in the future. I would like to emphasize on the phrase on this statement that we are in the future right now, and there are so many new industries that already came up, and the technology shift is happening at the exponential scale. It was earlier also happening at an exponential scale. At this point, the exponent has been increased even more. So I I feel we are moving towards more of a dynamic industries where a biotech in itself won't be able to solve the problem. Biotech would be combining with the biotech would handhold with AI, it would handhold with blockchain, it would handhold with cloud security, and all of these 4 industries in together will be solving the problem. So maybe in future we'll be going to see the amalgamation of all the different industries coming up.
Thanks, Sagar, for that insight. I firstly, Jaishri, I would like to point out, you did talk about businesses being washed off completely in the pandemic time, and I think my business is also one of them. I mean, all 3 of our food trucks are inside campuses and universities. They are still shut. There are no students, so we don't have any market. So we're not generating any money. It's been more than 2 years. So my industry, Frush, is one of the examples wherein it's not actually fail proof. You have to be very, very dynamic in terms of adoption. Like Sagar pointed out, dynamic approach is something which is going to lead innovation in the days to come. And also there are a few limitations to that, because food industry is not something which is always universal or constant throughout the year. Okay, it's kind of seasonal as well. So let's take up an example of Coke. So Coca-Cola is a seasonal beverage. It's a seasonal product. You don't see sales too much in the winter season. Rather, it's even probably 10x in summer season, right? So for the food business, there are several factors affecting it, and it entirely boils down to the idea why it was launched, what pain point the business F&B business was trying to solve. So and that also brings me to the kind of innovation that has been happening in the biotech space. I'm currently working with a company which is into blockchain technology. It's called Maxwell IoT Technologies Incorporation. It's headquartered in Dallas, Texas, USA. So we are mainly working on the Helium blockchain, which is into deployment of a large-scale network using LoRaWAN protocol, wherein the consumption of power is very, very minimal. I mean, when we talk about devices, IoT sensing devices, we usually talk about power and battery. So because most of our devices are powered using a kind of static battery fuel, right? So when it comes to IoT devices, there has to be something which is able to establish the connection or a network which stretches too far in terms of the distance. So this is where Helium comes in. Why I'm taking that example is because it has some relevance with the biotech industry as well. There is this company called which is into the therapeutic segment called Veldi Therapeutics. They are based in Bombay. Right. Yeah, and they are more into in the health segment, as in they have devices which kind of continuously measure your health. They have some IoT implants which are put inside the body. They kind of keep track of all the vitals, and then also for diabetic control. They also have a very, very innovative AI and ML based platform and application which kind of helps you adopt to a new lifestyle, which eventually gives results in changing the kind of health state you were in before. So these kind of technologies are very innovative, and with the onset of blockchain technology, this is going to be even more scalable. I mean, you can't even think of something. Let's say, for example, I'll take an example of a dog collar. It's not usually found in India, but then in USA, it's a very, very common use case. A dog collar is something which is used to track the location of the dog. So as far as the dog is inside home, connected to a Bluetooth connection or a Wi-Fi network, you are good to go. You can always track the dog with, using your mobile application. You can always track the location using the GPS, right? What happens when you accidentally left the door open? Okay, the dog will definitely try to run off. And when he does that, either you would be running or you would be calling 911, right? Only there are two options, because you can't track it on your mobile device. So what they are doing is they are trying to create a network wherein all these devices are connected via long range. Even if your dog goes out, they will be connected to the internet, enabling you to keep a track on your dog. Doesn't matter if your dog is running 5 miles away from your house or probably 50 miles away. So these kind of technologies are kind of facilitating the process even more. I mean, I'm really excited because in the days to come, let's say from today by 2035, we would be seeing a new era in terms of biotechnology. It is going to be huge because everything is connected to internet. And when that happens, you can track everything. You can be well aware ahead of anything going wrong, which is the best part. I mean, that's the sole objective of innovating, right?
Surely, sir, that's really true, because biotech industry is something that is ever growing, and I consider it to be, it's always going to be useful. Like there's always something to look forward to. So, since when you started, and yes, we do know that how fresh trucks are right now shut off, and this is something really prominent in startups, that there will be losses, there will be hardships, but since today's youth is not very accustomed to taking hardships and taking loss in that manner, they are really they really look forward to the success part of all the innovation and all the business. So how would you suggest, how would what kind of hardships will be there, and how does one should take it?
Okay, I think that's a very, very important question, Jayashree, because I can relate to that situation a lot during my journey with Fresh. There have been times when I did not get to eat. I mean, for like there was this time when we had to launch it. I was in my military training that time, and then there was this constant pressure from AII that we have. Because I had already given the launch date, but we were not able to do it due to several things coming all at once. So and again, the thing is, you are dependent on a lot of factors. The objective is, when you get things done on the ground, that happens only when everything aligns to the objective, right? With your motion. So if you are ready, doesn't mean other things are also ready at the same time. So that sort of, caused a delay all the time in our deadline. And when we did it, we were so happy that at least the first day when we were able to cross sales, we thought that potentially now we will be able to do good, but then that was not the reality. It was every day's struggle till the time when we reached our third food truck, and we were clocking a revenue of 1.7 crore a year. But then we were struggling with the margins. We were constantly trying to innovate and customize at the same time the product, what our students and the customers wanted. But then even that did not guarantee or assured success in this business. But then we are very glad we kind of have some plans still for Frush. We have our first franchisee up and running in Gurgaon, Ifco Chowk, and at that area we have several food trucks which are in direct competition with us. But then we also hold some USP. We have brought out several changes in our menu. We have done innovation in that segment, and also we have brought in a new revenue vertical wherein we are trying to create a kind of loyalty with Frush, and also we would want to move more into the franchise segment. But this particular challenge was something which I was not estimating in the first place. I mean, business was good, everything was good, scalability was there. We were kind of sticking to a constant margin, but then we were not aware that pandemic would disrupt everything. This actually made us think from the very beginning why we failed in this segment. So, I mean, there are few things and situations like these, pandemic, especially make you rethink about your strategies. So you have to have a plan B, but then it's like I said, it's not a guarantee on the basis of this.
So I would like to add few points on the factor that the pandemic disrupted mostly everything. So events like pandemic, we call it black swan events, and there has been such black swan events in past, and one of the ways people have pivoted through it is to kind of predicting them in advance. Now, when we say how can we predict such events in advance, there is a very interesting discipline. We call it as a strategic foresight, where we take a particular segment and we think of some critical uncertainties which might come up in future with respect to those areas. So if we kind of reverse engineer COVID, we can think of some critical uncertainties in fact that so a virus or a flu virus taking over the whole world was one of the critical uncertainty. It was uncertain as anything, but it was very critical in that nature. So we kind of list down certain critical uncertainties which might happen in future, and while combining those, we try to think of a future, or how would a world look like if these critical uncertainties are playing around. What if I so one of the so one of the example is that AI. So at this point, all of the examples of the AI which we are looking is, I would say, more of an incomplete AI. The complete AI, we call it when an AI will take a form of a human being and he will be able to function in a replica of human brain. So if that happens, we can call it as a critical uncertainty, because it is going to be very critical if that happens, and that is going to be very uncertain because research is still since the incomplete AI, we have kind of scaled it up to anything. But when we talk about this sort of AI, the research is still growing. So when looking at a particular industry, we have to map down, we have to think of what all the technology trends are going, what all the social trends are, social factors are going, economical, environmental, political. We think of all of these aspects, and we come back to such uncertainties which help us visualize the world that it will look like that. And is my current business able to take on if that world comes up? So we ask those questions, and we make our business that dynamic in nature that if we see early signs of, okay, one of the possibility is coming up, or one of the possibility is actually happening, then what is the pivot which I can quickly take and maneuver the business around it?
Surely, sir. So since we are seeing that lot of things, just supposedly like we have this whole pandemic thing, and since you talked about those trends, so in this time there is this certain situation where all the youth is following that, yeah, this is in trend and we should follow that, and this is somewhere this is very right as well, because we should go for the demand and the supply. That's the whole notion. But then for some people who have these or out of box ideas, it's very difficult for them, and they sometimes feel that it's not their place or it's not their time to showcase their ideas. So what are your views on that? Should they or shouldn't they, or if they are doing some such things, if they are taking out their ideas, so what should they keep in mind?
So out of the box ideas in terms of other than COVID ideas, right?
Yes, like as in general, for not just following the ongoing trends, but also looking for something other, maybe futuristic, maybe something cultural or
I
something.
think I think that is completely normal, and that is a personal choice which everybody has. Maybe I am a fashion designer, and I don't know what the hell is going in the in this segment. So I might think of a business which is completely new and innovative and a very good value in a fashion design industry. So I so that is, I think that is completely normal and boils down to personal preference. And one thing to make sure is that, see, following a trend is always an important stuff, but always, yeah, you also have to think of an viability aspects over the years. You have to think of a desirability aspects of it, because if you're designing something for COVID era, and what if the COVID is over? What then? So in that segment, so either by following trends or not following trends, I think uh, a strategic foresight kind of a thinking should always be there, that how uh, what if in coming 1 year the COVID is gone and people are back to office, then is my remote work home solution going to matter? Maybe no. So am I going to scale up enough in that 1 year and make revenue? So a, a idea has to, or I would say a kind of a long term mindset has to be taken in approach during such times.
So, sir, building with this strategic foresight, what will you say, like, those major key points that one should, always keep in mind if they are developing their strategic foresight, or if they're developing any kind of strategies for their business?
So, uh, for starters, I would say there are some 4 to 5 key areas. One is what all technological trends there are in that segment. What are the social trends, or what are the social aspects in that area? What is the economical environment around that? What is an environmental around that? And what is the geopolitical status around that? So we call it steep analysis. So before, or even when we are concretizing the idea stage, I think these analysis helps a lot in able to understand today, tomorrow, and what might come in future. So we kind of think it in terms of picking up the signals. What we call it a trend would have been emerged as a very light signal maybe 3 or 4 years back. Those signals got strengthened over the time, got adopted amongst the people, and that has been now concretized as a trend, which you see today. So picking up those signals, having a splatter vision is something which uh, has a very important role to play in entrepreneurship.
Surely, sir. And thank you so much for that. I hope our audience will be noting down those points because they're really valuable. So this one question that I had personally, since I belong to a department from food technology, and there are long companies that have already established their roots and they are going on since years, and now they are coming forth with evidences that have been proclaimed that their products were not that good, their products were not that satisfied, they were not good for the customers, and now they do agree with those claims. But since those routes have been so much gone through, like, people love their brands, they are not just focusing on the products now, they just love those brands. So how difficult it will be for the new startups, because even if the products are not good for the customers, the public is still going on for those brands only. So for the new coming startups, what should how should they go for their customers? What should how should they attract the customers?
Sagar, would you like to take that up?
I am thinking of an example. I think when we are comparing startups with incumbents, one thing we have to make sure, or one thing we have to understand that so starting up something is a game of patience, speed and patience at the same time, and the friction which comes in between of that actually produces timing. So one is to keep up. So this is more of a branding and communication side of it, to keep their messages very clear and very concise, and to, I would say, always always keep on giving the taste of what they have, or what their product has. So yeah. Himanshu, I would like to understand your views on this.
Yeah, sure. I think someone has raised a question about Hike, why it failed. So I think that would be the best example to explain the situation. Hike, there are several reasons for that, and also some are unknown because the founders never really came out to express why it failed. There was no clear explanation from them. But then, what I have read so far about the fall of Hike was that, I mean, there is a reason why monopoly exists. Okay, and see, I mean, it is very evident that there is only one China for the world. There cannot be any other China, right? Because for obvious reasons, it's monopoly in manufacturing. Everyone might try to replicate the kind of strategies they have, or the business diversifications they have done already in the past 50 years, but then still nobody has came up to kind of portray themselves as China. So here, I mean, a lot of things depend upon the business management as well, and the marketing. What I found was that marketing team was something should be blamed, because when America was coming out with shrewd strategies about these tech startups back in time, when WhatsApp was picking up its pace, and they were going leaps and bounds at that time. I mean, Hike, why didn't Hike do anything to try to at least take up that particular share? They did not even kind of roll up their sleeves and then get into the market and do something innovative when it comes to marketing, although their product was very good. So eventually, like, I feel marketing, if marketing would have done in a proper way at that time, at least things would have not been this bad for Hike. I mean, they literally just kind of went off the internet. But then they had to keep their roots in the tech industry. So they kind of represented themselves in the sticker segment. So that was done in April 2019, if I'm not wrong. So the point here is, I mean, it's always great to be able to get along the trends, but then trends doesn't guarantee you if they are going to be successful or not. So ever-changing trends, it's like honey for the honeybee, and then it will lure everyone into it because everyone wants to ride the wave. And it is always advantageous if you are the first mover. So it's more like a race with brands, and also a mental race psychologically, that you want to be the first one in the race.
So this first, to be the first, this takes a lot of courage, and there's this one question that I believe that is asked everywhere, and everyone who's starting with their own startup, they all have the same questions, that if they make the first move, what if that move gets copied, or what if somebody else does a better job at that. And a lot of time people take step backwards with that idea in their mind and do not act on it. So what would you advise our youth and all the audience who are watching this to do with that?
I think if you have a very disruptive idea, I would say go for intellectual property analysis. I think that would help you to at least discover if somebody else is existing in the market with that idea, or I mean, I'm not typically talking about the logo or the slogan or the brand tag of your particular company, but then mainly about the idea. You will get to know about all these things before entering the market. And also, like I mentioned, it is very important if you are in touch with people who are in the startup industry, because if they have an incubation center just like AII and IA, India Accelerator, I mean, they are also equally good. But what I'm trying to say here is being in touch with people like these always gives you an edge over others, because all they talk about is startup. And when it comes to new adoption, new trends, new startups coming up in the industry, especially the new niche segment is something which people usually target because there is lesser competition. But then again, what I feel is there is equal uncertainty in that domain as well, right? Let's say, I mean, everyone is now talking about blockchain, but we don't actually know where this is heading to. We know about the use cases. We are confident that the things are working out so far. We are able to probably, kind of forecast one step ahead, but then we still don't know where this is going to end. Let's say, for example, Bitcoin, when it came, we did not really focus more on the kind of drawbacks and the cons it had. Right now, it's just a digital currency, okay, with a limitation. It's limited, it's scarce, and that's why the demand is very, very uncertain. It can go up anytime, it can go down anymore. So the use case here is kind of confined to a boundary conditions as compared to Ethereum, which is the second stage technology. So there are a lot of things wherein you really want to get in touch with the kind of trending topics are evolving over time across the internet. You want to be the first one to make the move, but then there are no certainties around that. So what would really help you is to be in touch with people and research as much as you can. I mean, before you actually step into something, my principles are research and then get on the ground. If you know the reality, if you're confident enough, you're good to go. Other things would definitely follow, because confidence is something everyone wants to bet upon, right?
So I would also like to add a point over what Jason said, that people are afraid whether the idea will be get copied or not. So that completely depends on whether you are building a product for your company or you are building a feature for your competitor. This is a very important in frame, because sometimes we think that wow, I'm building something great and this is truly innovative, but we don't have enough research on our hands. We don't have enough experience on our hands to understand that this might also be an add-on for my competitor. It won't take more than a month or a 6 months to roll on this as a new feature uh, on some existing big company. So even in order to tackle this, I think uh, feature can be copied, but experience cannot be copied. So even if you're building something which is on an increment, so one way is to build something radical, take a radical innovation approach and think of something like Clubhouse, which nobody can even thought of. So that is one approach towards it. The other approach, if you are taking an incremental innovation approach, then always try to think in terms of it, how this can strengthen the experience for my end users. And the only way to understand is to understand the innate needs of your end customer. And when I talk about innate needs, the needs which even my customer is not aware of. I was getting bored of typing and communicating and sharing my ideas. I wanted something where I can speak and share. Clubhouse came and he understood my innate need. That's where it rolled in. So understanding the innate needs, creating inexpensive experience is something which can hold you down, even if the idea is on an incremental edge. So yeah.
So we have a question from Mr. Bharat. Mr. Bharat, would you like to share a question?
Yeah. Sagar sir, as you mentioned that currently we are living in the future, and if we see the exponents, we have currently got one exponent. We have growth onto the terms of the exponent, right? And also you mentioned that COVID. You have truly mentioned that COVID will not be forever. We can experience this situation for continuing for a year or two, but it won't be forever. So I would love to hear from both of you. Like, what do you think would be the impact of, like, say, onto the business strategy and business planning? If we see the current situation, there has been a paradigm shift of everything being offline to online, right? But post COVID, or if we say now, see, like the lockdown is now being raised up. People are now again back to work, and people are onto the ground. So, what do you think would be the change in the strategic aspect of the business, and how the designs of the business could be more sustaining in the post-COVID period?
So I would like to call a post-COVID period as a third world, because what we experienced before COVID was one world. What we experienced in past 1.5 years is the second world, and what is going to happen after a year or two is going to be a hybrid of something which still people are not sure what exactly it is going to be. It's better to call it off as a third world. And when we see and when we think of a primary shift in the strategic directions, things are going to be decentralized. Things are going to be hybrid in nature. Hybrid as in it is going to be a combination of uh, online, offline, both. Uh, businesses are going businesses are going lean in nature, because all the assets cannot be leveraged at a single point. Uh, DMart having its I would say stocks in crores was useless while everything was in lockdown. So things are going decentralized, lean in nature, and I think enough of the technological evolution has happened around us in past 2 3 years, with which we are seeing a rapid advancements amongst the every area of our life. We look at any segment and nothing is left uh, from disruptions. So yeah, world is going to be it is going to be more of a hybrid in nature of what we are experiencing today and what we have to experience after COVID.
Yeah, Sagar, I think correctly pointed out that there has to be a third world scenario into consideration. So I would also like to add one more thing here is in terms of strategic design, there is going to be a third layer imposed now for all the businesses coming in. I mean, after, let's say earlier you have had 5 checks before you get on the ground. So this time you are going to have the 6th check as well, because nobody thought we would end up having, the kind of eccentricities we had faced all this while. 2.5 years have been very, very difficult for the businesses. We never thought people would be working from home for this long, and also that too by taking a toll on their mental health. So these are all the things which has come out, and furthermore there are more challenges to now tackle and solve. So companies have grown immensely. The only industry that I think of has grown immensely is the pharmaceutical industry, because they were already in place, but then there has been some disruptions in the policy as well, government policies and attributations. So now companies are even more free, and they were able to grow 10x during the 2.5 years. There have been startups which were not really in the market, but they have come up now, and mainly in the mental health segment. So we have had Cure.fit, and we have had several startups just around that. But then for mental health, there are startups which are coming up in Bangalore and Mumbai, and people are actually hooking onto it. They are trying their services. They are getting benefited from it, because now after pandemic, people have actually understood that how much physical health is important to us. It is actually the mental health as well.
So we have one more question in our chat box. Ajinkya has asked, so once a startup is successful, but after some time the market gets saturated, so what should they do to scale themselves?
Saga, would you like to take that up first?
Uh, no, I think that falls more under your expertise.
Okay. So, I mean, I'll take up an example for my own example. I mean, Frush, there was a point wherein we were kind of very much distributed in terms of the segment that we already had. We were dealing in a very confined space inside the campus. So the kind of ratio that we had was almost 80-20. So we were experiencing a footfall of repeating customers, which was 80%, and only 20% of the customers were actually trying our food on a daily basis. So this was why I'm saying 20% new customers. It's not that somebody else from outside was trying our food, but then people who tried once 6 months back or 4 months back, I would consider them also in the new customer segment. So this change was very, very critical for us to be able to kind of improvise, because we wanted new customers as well to grow our business. So we started delivering to the nearby places till Achrol. People who are listening to me from university and who have tried food at Frush definitely would want to kind of link up to or refer to what I'm trying to say. So we never thought we would be delivering to nearby places when we were stuck with the same market share, and we were not seeing any more growth in terms of revenue. So these points are very critical, wherein you have to make some changes in your strategy. That is where strategic design and planning comes in. That is where innovation comes in. And the entire essence of this talk we have had so far boils down to only one thing, that you can't drive a business forever without innovation and strategic planning. So that's what I feel. I mean, this is why we are here trying to discuss and exchange thoughts. So no matter what you do with your business, no matter how big is your vision and goal is, you have to have innovation and ever-changing adoption of technology, most important, which is going to be a crucial part of your business catapult and then the bandwagon. So innovation and strategic planning are indispensable.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for that valuable insight. And I'm sure our audience loved it just as much we do. So now handing it over to Soumya. Soumya, go ahead.
As we approach the end of this enlightening session, I must say it was wonderful to have an interactive session with our respected guests. I would also like to thank on behalf of Team Entrepreneurship Cell, AUR, and Amit Innovation Incubator Jaipur to our honorable guests and alumni, Mr. Sagar Katwa and Mr. Himanshu Sharma, for joining us today and being a guiding light for the young entrepreneurs and sharing their valuable thoughts and advice with us. I would also like to thank Dr. Manju Kaushik, organizing chair, for her kind support throughout the event. I spell a very special mention for the entire IT team and Team Entrepreneurship Cell AUR for their tireless effort and dedication in organizing such knowledgeable events. A hearty thanks to all the wonderful audience present here. Thank you all for joining today's session. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Sam.
Yeah, may I end the session?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone have a question?
No, sir,
No,
I
I'm
believe
asking
we
about
have.
may I end the session?
Okay, yeah, please.
Thank you, sir.